Hey guys, it's been a while, and as you can see, things are a bit different because I moved. That's why I've been gone for like a month, 2 months. But if there's anything that could take me out of being lazy at work, it's one, either video games or video game adaptations. And I really wanted to talk about The Last of Us because it came out 2 days ago, right now, the first episode of the second season. And I do have a lot of thoughts. I'm not going to try to yap too much because who wants to listen to that? But I have some concerns. The thing that I will start off first with is that I genuinely don't think that, the first episode is, how do I put this? I don't think it's able to be viewed in one way because of how differently it interacts with the two types of people that are going to be watching it. And what I mean by that is that there are people who have just watched the first season and who haven't played the games who are going to walk into this episode and watch it. And then there are people who have played both games and watched the first season who are going to come into this episode and watch it. And I firmly believe that almost two different episodes exist. And there's like quite a few reasons for it. On the main channel, if you've watched, I've talked about how there is no real way to have a second first impression when it comes to fiction. And there are things called extra narrative materials. And basically what extra narrative materials are, it's things outside of the fiction itself that influences your interaction with that fiction, right? So it could be like how you become emotionally invested in it, what you expect, what you want to see, that kind of stuff. So like the easiest type of thing that most people can kind of understand as extra narrative material are trailers.
I'm leaving tomorrow.
Right? So trailers for pretty much anything are technically outside of the narrative of the fiction itself. Even though they take like small depictions of it, they're outside. And what a trailer can do is give you ideas, feelings, wants, desires in relation to that fiction without you ever actually having seen that fiction before. A perfect example of this actually is a bunch of Marvel movies, right? So what Marvel will do, or I should say did, is they will just have fake scenes in their trailers. And those fake scenes will make it so that you expect things to happen in the movie, even though you have not seen the movie before. But then those things won't ever happen, right? Extra narrative material could be posters that a fiction releases, alongside it. Extra narrative material could be interviews that the cast does that you see, right? So it's anything outside of the actual fiction itself that's informing you about how you should create opinion about that fiction. And specifically for adaptations, and really for video games, extra narrative material takes like a huge front seat because people who played the games are going to come in already having an extensive knowledge about what's going to be happening in this first episode of the second season of The Last of Us. But people who haven't played the games and don't know are not. And so that's why I say there's almost like two episodes at play here, because I have seen multiple people who haven't really interacted with the games at all and are just watching the show as a show really like the first episode. And conversely, I have seen multiple people who do know the games and are deep inside the fandom say that the episode was just like fine. And I honestly think it was like fine. If I have to give it a rating, I'd probably say like a 6 or a 7. My main concern with it, and I think a lot of people who again played the games like me are really into the material like me. My main concern was that because of how much I know happens immediately after all this stuff, I was kind of hoping that the show would dive into it, at least not, or I should say maybe not like full force, but with a bit more confidence in speed. Because if we look at this episode just from like a narrative perspective, nothing really happened, right? Like this is the first thing that I want to talk about. Like from beginning to end of the episode, if we want to talk about like, again, very specific objective narrative material, there wasn't much change from beginning to end of the episode. It was completely set up. And the only real reason this could happen is because, one, the material is so well known, and two, this is the first episode of the second season, so they didn't have to establish a ton of conflict. But if you think about it, nothing really happened with Joel, right? From the beginning to the end of the episode, Joel was kind of in the same position. He was kind of in the doghouse with Ellie. And that is the same with every character. Abby didn't really change her position at all from beginning to end. Ellie, aside from, I think, kissing Dina, didn't really change much. We learned that there are infected that are coming towards Jackson, but like, that was always happening. It's not like this is new information. We got information about stalkers, but that's not pertinent to what's happening in the immediate episode, right? From beginning to end, it was a lot of character development. Although development is kind of I'm gonna use that loosely, because it was actually much more, I think, just setup. I don't think there was much transition across like the characters from beginning to end. And that's a huge deal for people who already know these characters, right? For people who don't know them, this was probably very entertaining, right? Seeing this 5-year time skip, seeing the tension between Joel and Ellie after their closeness from season 1, seeing how Jackson has grown and evolved and how people are pretty much almost living in a normal civilization. For people who don't know what's happening, for people who are just approaching this without the extra narrative material of the games, I could see why they would really like the episode. But I do think that all of the just character-centric personal interaction moments didn't really do much for the people who already have a love for this fiction and know what's gonna happen. Because for people who don't know, like if you're not like aware of what's going on in The Last of Us season 2, what will happen, the reason that I and myself, or I and other people are kind of quote unquote bored with this first episode is this story goes so balls to the wall so fast that all of this stuff happening here seems incredibly mundane and honestly doesn't even matter. Like, none of this, I'm gonna be real with y'all, none of this stuff matters in this first episode. I don't know when it's gonna happen, and you're gonna know exactly what it is, because I don't want to spoil anything for people. But when it actually kicks off, you're gonna go back and watch this episode 1 and be like, oh, okay, I get why, like, in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't that interesting. And I think that actually gets to a second point. The show is fundamentally, I think, changing how the story is being told. Again, without necessarily spoiling too many things, the games tell the story in asynchronous chronology, which basically is just a fancy way of saying out of order, right? So we get a ton of flashbacks with Ellie and Joel and Abby, and we learn about their pasts in different parts of the game after pivotal events have happened, right? The difference with the show now is that a ton of material that was kept from us until later is being revealed. And I'm not going to come right off the bat and say that that's bad or it's creating a worse atmosphere narratively for the show, but it is significantly different. It's too early to tell what the execution is like, but it is going to be, I think, a point of interest for me to see how they bridge that gap, because huge parts of the conflict for the games is based in the pacing of finding out this information, like after waiting and stewing in the emotions of the characters. For example, Abby is not revealed to actually hate Joel until probably what, like an hour or two into the game. She is looking for Jackson along with her friends, and we can tell that they're hunting someone, but we're not necessarily convinced it's Joel. I mean, it could be Joel, but it could be Tommy or anybody else in Jackson. And Joel actually meets up with Abby in the games and hangs out with her for a bit. And us playing as Joel, we think we found a companion who a skilled companion, and then the bomb drops, and then everything happens, which again I will try not to spoil. But the show has chosen to, from the get-go, talk about and reveal Abby's hatred towards Joel. And we know she's coming there to kill him, and pretty much anyone who's going to stand in her way. Again, from a fundamental basis, there's nothing objectively wrong with this. I personally just wonder if there's missed opportunity for the construction of long-term tension, right? Like stewing in the drama of the show. I really thought the show was going to have the episode end with Joel meeting Abby, because they talked about letting people in. I thought that speech was going to kind of like inspire him to, be more accepting, maybe even go out and look for people. And Abby runs into him and she lures him back to whatever hideout that they have. But that didn't happen. Again, stuff is probably going to go down later on. But I did think that for the most part, the drama and the choices that they made around the conflict led this episode to be very, very muted when it comes to playing up on, I think, all the interesting parts that the game stood on as part of, I think, its core draw, and what the show could have done. Again, Neil Druckmann is a part of the process, and I have a lot of faith in the creative team. So I hope that, things will work out, because I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be at least another season, if not 2 other seasons. So it's a long game that they're playing. But the changes that they've made, I think, are, I'm going to say, potentially problematic for how the show does run long term. I guess some small little parts to talk about throughout, I think, the episode. I think additions that they made were largely fine. There's a ton of new material that they have, but there's also a ton of reused material, sometimes down to like the same shots. And I think some of Joel's scenes, especially with the psychiatrist, psychotherapist, are very interesting. And they are, I think, building up Joel for what is going to happen and what's going to come with his character going forward. As far as, I think, the performances, I am still kind of on the fence about Ellie and Dina looking as young as they do. Now, obviously, like they can't do anything about that. They're like the age accurate portrayals of what they're supposed to be. But Bella Ramsey, and I'm not sure Dina's actress's name, I know they're like 19, 20. But they look like they're still like 14 and 15, and it's slightly drawing me out of the fiction. I think they're both really good in their roles, right? Like, I think obviously Bella Ramsey killed it in the first season, and Dina honestly acts like Dina. I don't know why they didn't bring the actual Dina actress back, because maybe, I don't know, she's too old now. But I think production wise, still top tier. I think acting wise, Pedro Pascal is, again, really selling it. All the people who have stupid complaints online about so many different things that have nothing to do with the story, I think just are salty and looking for things to complain about, because again, as I've shown, there are, I think, legitimate things to be concerned about with the show. I am eager to see how it continues and how it progresses, because the game, to me, Last of Us 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and I truly believe it's one of the best games ever made. I know it's very controversial. I think a lot of the takes that have been given about the game are overblown. I recognize it's subjective art, so, every person's going to take away something differently. But I am really curious about how they're going to handle the narrative for this season going forward, seeing as how they're changing not only how it's being told, but I think large sections of how the characters were even going to be portrayed during it. Because without flashbacks, I truly don't have a clear view of how they're going to tell some of these story elements together, but we'll see. So those are my thoughts on the episode. I will be back to uploading to this channel soon. Also, keep an eye out for my books. I just released one today, if it's April 15th, and I uploaded this today. So go to my website, I'll include a link in the description. And go over to the second channel as well. That's something I meant to tell you guys, which I probably should have put at the start of the video. I have a whole second channel, which is the third channel, just talking about the world of my books and the inspirations that come from them. So I hope you guys enjoy. See you later.